Chapter 1636 Sovereign Pontiff. Fremons had sent only one person, Thor, and didn't even let him bring more mutants with him to the trip except for a few of his close friends. However, this was enough to express Fremons' attitude. After all, Thor was already one of the top few mutant powerhouses in Fremons today. It was impossible for them to give too much strength to support Hwashu Kingdom. After the end of the world, every kingdom had its own headaches, and they had to hold on to their home base. Western Europe, Vatican. This was the headquarters of the Sovereign Pontiff, and although it covered an area the size of a small city, it was the religious center with the most believers in the world. After the end times, the power of faith became more and more important, and even those who once didn't believe in gods began to try to gain inner comfort by honoring them. This also led to the rapid rise of the Sovereign Pontiff as a terrifying force with a huge scale of mutant troops. Daylight spilled down from the ceiling of St. Peter's Basilica, and in the center of the Holy Church, Pope Richard Alexander X was praying with his hands clasped together as he stood in front of a huge cross. On one wall of the church, a sermon on the Messiah, hand-painted by the famous 6th-century painter Kinobuchi, was painted. The thin daylight that passed through the colorful glass fell on the floor, reflecting a mysterious light. This luminescence enveloped Alexander X, making him look incomparably pious and holy, adding a bit of mystery to this divine agent in the hearts of the believers. Screech! The doors of the church were slowly opened, and a bishop dressed in red walked in. His long body left a long side shadow in the church, and the steps he took were firm and steady. He slowly walked behind the Pope, but stopped after maintaining a distance. He waited until the Pope finished his prayers, and he slowly opened his eyes, knowing who the person who came was without turning around. "Olive, what can I do for you?" Cardinal Arnold Olive hung a silver cross on his chest, holding a copy of the canon in his hand, and respectfully hung his head and said, "Your Holiness, we have received a request for help from a distant eastern kingdom." On Alexander X's wrinkled face, his eyes slowly opened, and a deep flash of light flashed through them. "Hwashu Kingdom?" "Yes, Your Majesty." The corners of Alexander X's mouth curled up inadvertently. He knew about the matter of Hwashu Kingdom encountering an attack from an underground civilization in the first time. As the Pope of the Sovereign Pontiff that had billions of followers around the world, in a sense, he was the most appealing person in this world. Even if this small Vatican, with less than 1 square kilometer of land area, didn't know how many internationally renowned big names in this world would willingly serve him. There was nothing he wanted to know that he couldn't know. Alexander X said, "That is a land without faith." The people of that kingdom never honored the gods, and they only prayed for their help when they were in need. Just like now. Olive asked, "Yes, Your Majesty." But what they encountered this time was an attack from a very powerful underground civilization. Also, Hwashu Kingdom is an important force in maintaining the stability of the world at the moment. Alexander X's eyes were slightly cold. "You mean to send out our Holy Knights Templar to help them?" Olive bowed. "You said that it was a land without faith. But this time we have a very good opportunity to shed the light of the Sovereign Pontiff on that barren land and take root there." Alexander X laughed as he narrowed his eyes and looked up at the huge statue of the Messiah's crucifixion in front of him. "We have tried this sort of thing many times. However, humans will only understand the importance of honoring God when they suffer." He opened his arms, the white, gorgeous papal clothes on his body unfolding like the feathers of an eagle. "Let them feel more pain. When that time comes, we will then rescue them in the name of God." Olive sniffed and had no choice but to nod her head. "As you command, Your Majesty." Brahma. As Hwashu Kingdom's neighboring country and also one of the top 10 forces in the world today, they naturally received Hwashu Kingdom's request for assistance. For this reason, the top brass of Brahma also gathered and held a god tribute meeting. Brahma had always been a country where politics and religion were integrated, and when the end times came, those existences that were lucky enough to become mutants became known as apostles who had received the favor of the Trimurti. Among them, the 8 most outstanding ones were the 8 tribes' heavenly dragon who had killed their way out after going through the trials of the Trimurti gods. The god tribute meeting was held at the temple of Bhagawara in Brahma. In the pantheon, according to tradition, they first made sacrifices to the Trimurti gods, and then the leader of the celestial crowd, the Emperor Indra, who also took the title of the heavenly emperor in Brahma's mythological legends, directly expressed his attitude to the rest of the crowd. Let's not intervene in the state of affairs facing Huashu Kingdom this time. First, next to the development of things. First, determine the degree of strength of the underground civilization forces on Star Island. Secondly, decide on the next move based on the battle situation. Our aim is to ensure that Huashu Kingdom's national power will be weakened in the midst of this battle. But it's not like the Star Island mysterious civilization will threaten the Brahma Alliance. Brahma was adjacent to Huashu Kingdom, and there had always been a hidden rivalry between the two countries. This time, the Xingjing side hadn't expected them to come to their aid, and had only sent a symbolic request for assistance. Hence Emperor Indra's attitude. The faces of the people below all had satisfied smiles on their faces as they nodded their heads, thinking that this was the best option at the moment. Among the crowd, Gao Changkong's expression was a bit strange. Thinking about his hometown, his heart was very complicated. But right now, his hometown, it was difficult for him to go back. At this time, the Kanara, next to him, noticed Gao Changkong's complicated expression and intentionally said in a provocative tone, "Garuda, you're not thinking about your hometown, are you?" As soon as these words were uttered, everyone's gazes couldn't help but fall onto Gao Changkong's body, their eyes filled with sizing up. Because of Gao Changkong's power, they had given Gao Changkong a false Kshatriya identity. However, everyone here was a top Brahma figure, so of course they were clear about Gao Changkong's original identity. So for this mutant who occupied the identity of one of the 8 tribes and was from Huashu Kingdom, they always habitually maintained some wariness and even hostility. Gao Changkong glanced at the crowd, and even Emperor Indra looked at him with playful eyes. He hummed lightly and said indifferently, "My parents and friends have already died on that land, and I have nothing left to hold on to with regards to Huashu Kingdom. The present-day me is the Garuda of Brahma." Chapter 1637 Pupil. In the middle of the temple, the handsome man Emperor Indra, who was naked and wore a golden crown on his head, smiled as he walked towards Gao Changkong. "Garuda, I hope you can remember that it was Brahma who saved you in your most critical time." His large hands were placed on Gao Changkong's shoulders, and his deep eyes stared into Gao Changkong's eyes. "Never do anything foolish. Otherwise, the Trimurti will never forgive you." "Me too." Gao Changkong felt a great sense of oppression. Although nowadays, he was already a mutant close to the Black Chariot level, and was a top-ranked existence when looking at the entire 8 tribes' heavenly dragon congregation. However, when facing this true pride of heaven in front of him, the possessor of the top Brahmin bloodline, and the #1 powerhouse of the Brahma Alliance, he still had a very huge gap. Gao Changkong clasped his hands together and saluted with the standard gesture of the Brahmin religion. "I will not forget your teachings." As he hung his head, in an angle unseen by others, the corner of his mouth curved up in a dismissive arc. Sharp winds whistled over the snowy plains and through the frozen jungle. Even the huge coniferous forests struggled to survive under such temperatures, frozen into rows of silvery ice sculptures. Deeper into the woods, however, there was a quiet and peaceful area where an ancient Gothic castle stood. On the 3rd floor of the castle, inside an ancient library, the red bookshelves carried the aura of the vicissitudes of age, and the shelves were filled with thick books, which were all old editions that were already extremely rare in the outside world. One must know that in this electronic age, most people had basically said goodbye to reading paper books. In this library, it looked like it had to be at least 100 years old. Because there were even parchment scrolls on the shelves, as well as thread-bound books with very rough sewing techniques. An old man with a full head of silver hair walked alone to the bookshelf, and after rummaging through the bookshelf labeled Economics area for a few moments, he took down a copy of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, and then leisurely walked over to the nearby mahogany book table, and flipped open the pages to read it. Just as a European-style classic building, and such an old study, but unexpectedly did not see in a conspicuous place that is almost a must-have Holy Scripture. The old man's body was well dressed, with an English-spun facecloth suit that fit snugly to his upper body, looking understated and sophisticated. He did not do eye surgery to adjust his presbyopia, but chose to pull out a somewhat aged presbyope from his breast pocket, hang it on his ear, and slowly flipped through that great canon in the field of economics. The old man read for a long time, oblivious to the cold wind whistling outside the window, the cold wind knocking on the window, that kind of irregular rattling instead, led him some enjoyment. Vaguely recalled the time when he was young, in Massachusetts reading business administration. Knock knock knock. Beyond the old wooden doors, there was an unhurried knocking sound. The old man slowly turned his head to look at the doors, then said, "Come in." Screech dash. The thick wooden doors whose color was already close to black were slowly opened, and a middle-aged man wearing an expensive suit with a refined appearance walked in from outside. He had a silk handkerchief of burlesque on his chest, and after entering the doors, he first carefully used the handkerchief to wipe away the traces he left on the door handle. It looked like a killer's sequence in a movie, but what this gentleman did was just to keep his sweaty hands from corroding the doors, which were original from the 1930s. The middle-aged man walked a short distance in front of the older gentleman and respectfully hung his head. "President, we have received a request for assistance from Washu Kingdom." The unassuming old man at the table, whose appearance could be found anywhere within the library of any university in the world, then slowly removed his own presbyopic glasses before gently closing his book with a wrinkled palm and looking up at him. "Washu Kingdom?" He reconfirmed. "Yes." The middle-aged man hung his head. "What we feared most has happened ahead of schedule. The mysterious civilization underneath Star Island has taken the initiative to launch an attack on the human kingdom due to repeated intrusions from the neighboring kingdoms. The entire 4 regions of Washu Kingdom, as well as Columbia's fleet stationed in Neon's harbor, were all attacked." The old man leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. "We knew that this day would come sooner or later." The middle-aged man said, "Chairman, should we use our own power to help them get through the difficulties at hand?" The old man crossed his hands on his knees and lowered his eyebrows and thought for a long time before slowly saying, "The meaning of Pupil's existence is to fight against the fate of heaven. It is precisely because of this that we formed a few hundred years ago, uniting many like-minded people from all over the world. And I've been honored to hold the position of president, and I've always felt guilty, fearing that I wouldn't be able to take on this responsibility. This time, it is the first time that the human kingdom has had a large-scale collision with an underground civilization. It marks the beginning of a new era, and there will probably be more and more situations like this in the future. No one can predict how dangerous this war will be." He said a lot before falling into the middle of contemplation once again. The middle-aged man, Pupil Organization's 32nd level member King's servant, Mildred Bratt, who was second only to the immediate president Charlie Louis Montesquieu, said in a gentle tone, "Your concern is correct. Moreover, the one from Washu Kingdom that we just recently focused on chaos, has a big conflict with one of the 4 horsemen." Montesquieu pondered for a long time, and Bratt waited patiently on the sidelines. After about 2 minutes, which was a long time, the air was silent. Only then did Montesquieu speak. "In our plan, Washu Kingdom is an essential force. Whether it's that little girl known as Ho-Tu, or our latest concern Chaos, both have the potential to become one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse." "Then, do you mean to mobilize the members of Pupil, and go to support them?" Bratt asked. Montesquieu shook his head. "The situation at hand is not clear to us at all, and our greatest enemy is not the human kingdoms or even those underground civilizations, but those God-fearing lackeys." After thinking for a while, he slowly said, although we can't send people there, let's express our sincerity. Brat said, you mean to say? Montesquieu waved his hand at him, speaking of which, we haven't dealt with that rising Huashu Kingdom kid yet. This time, let's give him a gift of great value. Brat sniffed and immediately understood what Montesquieu meant. There weren't many gifts that could be useful to a Black Chariot-level mutant in this world anymore. Chapter 1638, Gift from the Pupil Organization. Tianhai City. Zhang Yi put Yang Xinxin in charge of communicating the battle plan with the people from the 6 regions, while he himself went to the sky above Tianhai City Fortress and sat on top of the circular dome, looking in all directions. When one climbed up and could see everything around them, it would always give one a feeling of mastering everything. However, the distant beyond, the endless sea, would always give people a sense of fear. This time, Zhang Yi had perfectly repelled the attack of the Misty Valley troops. But what about the next time? The existence of the Hades gatekeeper was like a sword hanging over his head, ready to fall at any moment. He frowned, and from here, he could vaguely see the construction team in the distance. Li Changqing was leading the members of the Volt Shadow Troop, training hard on the edge of the Heron River. The War of All Things didn't have much of an impact on them at this time, so the daily training had to be kept up. However, once the Hades gatekeeper showed up here and came looking for him as the Sky Dragon King had said, all of this in Tianhai City, the peaceful nation that Zhang Yi had painstakingly built for 3 years, would completely disintegrate. Hades, gatekeeper. Zhang Yi's mouth softly recited this name, Sky Dragon King's warning still ringing in his ears. He had already worked very hard to become stronger, having surpassed everyone he knew. But compared to that incomparably powerful black-armored mutant back then, he still had a huge gap. It was as if it was an insurmountable moat that lay between the two. Zhang Yi had thought of countless possibilities to fight that black-armored mutant, but the result was invariably his defeat. I can only do my best now and listen to heaven's fate. If it's really not possible, I have to give up everything here. Zhang Yi said these words in as gentle a tone as possible. So easily, he was about to create an ideal country. But when the time came, all 80,000 people in Tianhai City might have to die. Muyan's shadow space wasn't that large and could only accommodate thousands of people at most, and when the time came, he would take a group of sources with him to escape, at most. Just as Zhang Yi was distracted, Tianhai City's alarm system suddenly sent him an alert. A warplane is heading into the airspace range of Tianhai City. The other party has already reported to the Jiangnan region in advance, labeled as coming from the island nation of Beachland in Western Europe. Zhang Yi was astonished. Beachland? What the hell was that place? He hadn't even heard of it, and he didn't seem to have any familiar friends who studied abroad. It was thought to be just a small country that wasn't famous, so why would anyone arrive from there? Zhang Yi said, ask who they are and what they are doing here. Soon after, Tianhai City's Air Defense Intelligence System asked these 2 questions for Zhang Yi. In less than 10 seconds, Zhang Yi received their reply. I'm from the Pupil Organization, my name is Mildred Bratt. This time, I am representing the Pupil Organization to give Your Excellency Chaos an important gift. Zhang Yi had never heard of any Pupil Organization at all, much less knew any Mildred Bratt. So what the other party said only made him even more hypnosis. But the good thing was that he understood the words that followed. This was a gift for him. Zhang Yi immediately that fighter delineated a landing spot, and without any hesitation, directly sent out the Tianhai City cannon to take aim at its position. Once he found any misbehavior from the other party, Zhang Yi would directly destroy that warplane at the first time. Rumble, that world's most advanced armed helicopter, the Bald Eagle Eye, landed at the airport in Tianhai City. Zhang Yi took Flower with him and came through space, not rushing to get closer, but keeping a sufficient distance to observe the warplane. I don't know anyone from the Pupil Organization. Tell me carefully, why did you guys come over to me and give me a gift? Zhang Yi was just a few kilometers away, conversing with them from a distance. Although with his strength, odds were that nothing dangerous would happen. But in case there was a special ability possessor inside that helicopter gunship, it was likely to swing him around. What about Epsilon? What about the Black Chariot? If he were to count with his heart, these battle-hardened humans would also be killed. At this particular moment recently, Zhang-Yi did not dare to be careless about anything. Mildred Bratt stepped down from the helicopter and immediately turned his head to look around when he heard Zhang-Yi's voice in his ear. As a result, he couldn't help but laugh as well when he didn't even see a single bird feather, not to mention people. According to their information, Chaos, this mutant, was very eccentric, clearly possessing strength that was so powerful that it could be considered as one of the top in the world, but was incredibly cautious. He had thought that he already had an understanding of Chaos's caution, but he did not expect that the other party would be so cautious in the face of him, an ordinary human, which was an eye-opening experience. Zhang-Yi had also carefully observed him over since he got out of the helicopter. Bratt raised his hands and said with a smile, "It's normal that you haven't heard of the Pupil Organization, but I think those Huashu Kingdom executives around you must know of our existence. Because we haven't had many dealings with each other. Please don't worry, we have no malicious intent in coming over this time, but rather, we have come over to give you a gift. This gift, I can guarantee that you will definitely like it." Zhang-Yi thought about it. Within the people around him, there weren't many who could contact the higher-ups. So Zhang-Yi directly contacted Deng Shintong. "Hey, Zhang-Yi, what are your orders?" Deng Shintong asked bluntly. His tone was grave, and he thought Zhang-Yi needed him to come to Tianhai City for support. Zhang-Yi rolled his eyes. "Let me ask you, have you heard of the Pupil Organization?" "Pupil? Of course I've heard of it. What, did one of their people contact you?" "Well, someone from them suddenly came over and said they wanted to give me a gift." "This is not surprising. With your current level of strength, you will come into contact with them sooner or later." Deng Shintong explained the Pupil Organization to Zhang-Yi. "This is a very ancient and mysterious organization. Their earliest name was Freemason. The purpose of the organization's establishment is unknown, perhaps because too many years have passed, and many of the guidelines from the beginning have been forgotten. All I know is that they are now the most mysterious and powerful membership organization in the world. Those who are able to enter them are all elites in various fields. There are even heads of some kingdoms." Zhang-Yi nodded, probably understanding in his mind. A member-based organization, this kind of organization is basically established to hold together and then work together to grab benefits. There's nothing to it. Deng Shintong laughed. "I didn't join them due to my status, so I don't know much about it. It's just that I'm reminding you to be more careful when facing them. Because many of them are human beings in there, and if you're not careful, you'll be fooled by them." Chapter 1639 Evolutionary Sword in the Tree. "I know." Zhang-Yi rolled his eyes and then ended his conversation with Deng Shintong. He already understood the other party's organizational attributes, and by the looks of it, it was possible that they had come over to pull him into the club. Zhang-Yi did not resist being solicited, provided that there were enough benefits. As for the gift mentioned by the other party, it was probably the benefits of joining the organization. After confirming for a while that there was indeed no danger around him, Zhang-Yi then took the initiative to show himself and appeared in front of Bratt. "What are you guys coming to me to give me?" Zhang-Yi asked bluntly. He was a person who did not like to beat around the bush with others, especially strangers with unknown intentions. Bratt looked at Zhang-Yi with a smile on his face. "We know that you will be facing a very tough battle next. So we hope to be able to provide you with some assistance," he said as he reached out towards the back, and behind him, a heavily armed soldier walked over holding a box. Zhang-Yi frowned. "Just stand there." He did not let the soldier continue to approach, but quietly opened the yuan doors, and he would immediately bolt once the situation became bad. Bratt had never seen such a steady person before and was greatly speechless. He said to himself, "I'm an ordinary person, if I dare to mess with you, this Black Chariot level mutant, wouldn't that be purely looking for death?" All right. Brat was also helpless, but he still personally reached out to open the thick black metal box. As the case opened, a transparent square box appeared in front of Zhang Yi. An incomparably familiar aura caused Zhang Yi's blood to tremble. Inside the transparent box, there was a fist-sized silver crystal with a mysterious luster flowing from it. That was clearly the aura of the source of God. Zhang Yi's heart shook as he did not expect that the gift that the other party was talking about was so valuable. One had to know that after the end times, many great powers would not hesitate to start a war in order to fight for a single copy of the source of God. A single source of God represented an epsilon-level mutant. The Pupil Organization actually took this item and gave it to Zhang Yi as a meet-and-greet gift. Zhang Yi needed it very much nowadays, because there were many people around him who had to improve their strength so that they could help him in the future wars. However, while excited, Zhang Yi still looked at Brat very cautiously. The source of God? You guys are going to give this to me? He was a bit disbelieving. Brat smiled faintly. Yes, Your Excellency Chaos. This is our Pupil Organization's gift to you. Zhang Yi thought for a moment and said with a serious expression, Does accepting it mean that I'm going to join your organization? Brat smiled and waved his hand. No, we don't take in members in such a clumsy way. Well, let's put it this way, within our organization, there are not a few existences like you. Even if you want to join the Pupil Organization, you have to be examined by our committee before you can do so. We simply want to help Your Excellency and win this crucial battle. In addition, if you are able to perform outstandingly, we will consider inviting you to join the organization. The corner of Zhang Yi's mouth twitched. Good Lord, is this Pupil Organization so tuggy? He was at least a black chariot-level chariot, and there were only a handful of them in the world, but this Mildred Brat in front of him didn't seem to take himself too seriously. This was something that Zhang Yi had misunderstood. The Pupil Organization's principle of membership was very harsh, and even in the post-apocalyptic world, strength was only part of the test criteria. If there was no way to satisfy their source requirements, even if the strength was strong, they would still firmly reject their membership. This had a lot to do with the core rule of their Pupil Organization. It was just that this rule, even amongst the Pupil Organization, was only clear to a few members who were above level 30. Zhang Yi didn't care about those, as his gaze had already been attracted by the source of God. Why wouldn't one want something that was given to him for nothing? Then, I will thank Your Excellency for your kindness. Zhang Yi said with a smile, then he raised his hand, and the box holding the source of God directly levitated from the soldier's hand, then disappeared into Zhang Yi's dimensional space. Brat placed his right hand in front of him and bowed in a slight salute. On behalf of our president, Mr. Montesquieu, I greet you. I wish you great success in this battle. After saying that, Brat turned around and boarded the helicopter gunship, leaving Tianhai City without a care in the world. Leaving Zhang Yi alone, he stood at the same spot in a daze. He had never dared to think about this good thing that fell from the sky. However, he didn't expect that it would really let him encounter it today. Whatever, I'll take it if it's given to me anyway. This is what you guys have to give me. I don't care if you talk about it in the future. Zhang Yi didn't want that much. Right now, the most important thing for him was to improve his strength, and of course, he had to take the source of God. However, who to give it to? Luke Karen, Yang Xinxin, or someone else? Uncle Yu and Fatty Su didn't have a high talent ceiling. The time it would take to use the source of God even if they reached Epsilon wouldn't be short, and the ceiling was limited. Luke Karen's abilities were mainly in the field of engineering and could not be directly applied to combat. Although Yang Xinxin's rules category ability was powerful, she had never cared much about raising her supernatural ability index. And as the next battle could happen at any time, Zhang Yi had to find a way to use this important resource to enhance his strength. He thought for a moment and looked at the dark silver-colored ring in his right hand. Feeling the aura of the source of God, the circle also underwent a slight tremor. That was the instinctive desire of a creature to evolve to a higher level. An idea had long been in his mind. That was to use the source of God or the spirit of sacrifice to elevate the sword in the tree to the epsilon level as well. Upgrading my weapon will allow me to maximize my strength. Just do it. Zhang Yi did not rush to absorb the source of God, but first returned to the middle of the shelter and called out to Zhou Qi to do a rigorous inspection. Only after confirming that the source of God did not contain any radioactive substances or other things that were harmful to the body did he release the sword in the tree with peace of mind. The moment it was released, the sword in the tree greedily surged towards the silver-colored gemstone, and then quickly wrapped it up, crazily absorbing all the evolutionary power within it. A moment later, the sword in the tree finished absorbing. It contentedly turned into a field of limp branches, reveling in the pleasure brought by this delicious divine substance. This thing is already brain dead, and is now a true vegetable with only instincts. By the time it is upgraded to epsilon, I don't know how long it will take in its natural condition. If only there was a way to help it accelerate its growth. Zhang Yi said softly. Chapter 1640 Li Jian's Ability. Qingpu Base. In times of war, the operations of the three major bases had been transferred underground. More than 100 meters deep underground, tens of thousands of post-apocalyptic survivors were now living, including the former aborigines of the Qing Creeping District, as well as the Huashu Kingdom people that Zhang Yi had later introduced from other cities. The appearance of Yuan Or had solved the energy problem of Tianhai City, allowing the place to never worry about heating again. As for food, it was also properly solved due to the fact that it was possible to fish by the sea, as well as the vigorous development of agriculture. In the underground biological warehouse of Qingpu Base, in the middle of a huge underground farm, Li Jian, the head of the Ministry of Agriculture, was wearing a white protective suit, carefully inspecting the growth of this season's crops. As a plant-based mutant, the way he enhanced his supernatural abilities had a unique channel compared to the combat-based mutants. Just by continuously cultivating crops, he could strengthen his skill proficiency and develop his supernatural potential. Coupled with the special nature of his abilities, he received special care from Zhang Yi, giving him quite a few resources for cultivation. Nowadays, he was already a mutant with an ability index of 8,000 points. As for Li Jian, these abilities were basically difficult to apply to combat, but he was able to speed up the maturation of the crops in the base, and could make the yield increase significantly. It could be said that nowadays, the entire Tianhai city's supply of crops that were needed all came from him. Li Jian carefully picked a bunch of green-colored wheat from the middle of the farmland, and then carefully counted the ears of wheat, beside which there were staff members recording its characteristics and the number of grains. Li Jian carefully counted the grains one by one, then relaxed his eyebrows and said to the staff, "This season's wheat growth is in good condition. It seems that this season's grain will increase by about 5% compared to last season's production." The staff was also full of joy and said while recording, "This is thanks to your efforts, Minister. Nowadays, our Tianhai city has been able to achieve grain freedom. Even if we look at the whole world, this is a very proud achievement." Li Jian smiled faintly, both satisfied and exclaiming, "This is thanks to Mr. Zhang. If it wasn't for him, it would be a question whether we would be able to survive right now." As soon as the words fell, a familiar voice came from behind him. "Li Jian, long time no see. Looking at you, your spirits seem to be pretty good. What, you don't need to utilize your body to cultivate seeds lately?" Li Jian's body appeared stiff for a moment when he heard this voice, and that was due to too much excitement. This voice was familiar to him, it was Zhang Yi's. He, on the other hand, hadn't seen Zhang Yi's face for too long. The ears of wheat in Li Jian's hands fell to the ground as he hurriedly turned back, and he saw Zhang Yi walking with a smile on his face. "Mr. Zhang." Li Jian's voice carried obvious excitement within it. Zhang Yi glanced at him, but his eyes swept over the entire huge underground farm. Underneath Qingpu Base, the area of the underground farm that had been opened up could be dozens of times larger than that above the ground. Just this farmland in front of him alone was more than 100 acres. and there were dozens of similar test fields underneath the entire Tianhai city. Thousands of acres of land, with the added power of Li Jian's ability and the help of modern agricultural technology, could accomplish planting and harvesting 6 times a year. This basically satisfied Tianhai city's demand for food. After all, the people who were able to enjoy food made from fresh grain were the local residents of Tianhai city. As for the outsiders, canned food and sea fish were still the main diet today. It's really good. This field is made in style. Perhaps one day, Zhang Yi's eyes lowered, we can also survive among the underground world. He couldn't help but think of those mysterious underground civilizations. Especially the Nash Kingdom under the southwest region. They too had built a complete ecological chain tens of thousands of meters deep underground and survived for long years. Would there come a day when they would also be forced to live underground? Supreme Excellency. All of the experimenters in the field clenched their right hands into fists on their chests and looked at Zhang Yi with a face full of excitement. The swaying eyes were like seeing a god. Ma Wenjing's training model for the Volt Shadow Troop had long been quietly introduced by the major bases. This was Yang Xinxin's instructions. Since they were going to create a god, it had to be complete and thorough. To make Tianhai City an independent region that was completely dominated by Zhang Yi. And the best way to maintain the stability of such an independent region was to have a supreme ruler. Zhang Yi was still a bit uncomfortable with this type of communication, but Yang Xinxin had also told him that the higher-ups needed to keep a sufficient distance from the lower-ups. Otherwise, if they lost the sense of mystery towards the higher-ups, they would not be as submissive in their hearts and would not be as reverent towards Zhang Yi's orders. Zhang Yi nodded at them before looking at Li Jian. You've been in pretty good shape lately. Has your ability been upgraded again? Li Jian laughed. Thanks to your blessings, I've now been tested by the organization and the latest report given is that I've reached the standard of 8,000 points of supernatural ability index. The smile on Zhang Yi's face became even brighter. Very good, it wasn't in vain that I specially trained you in the first place. He waved his hand towards the others, and the other staff members immediately understood that Zhang Yi had something to talk to Li Jian alone, so they all retired. After waiting until there were no other people around, Zhang Yi's face revealed a serious expression. Li Jian, right now, I have a very important matter that I need you to do. This matter may concern the survival of the entire Tianhai city. Hearing Zhang Yi say this, the muscles on Li Jian's face tightened up. He straightened his back, his heart was incomparably excited, probably not expecting that someone like himself, who only knew how to farm, could be entrusted with a heavy responsibility by Zhang Yi. Zhang. Supreme Excellency. As long as I am needed, you can just command me. Even if I give up my life, I will definitely endeavor to complete the job. Zhang Yi looked deeply at Li Jian, he frowned slightly and pondered for a long time, and inwardly, he also sighed lightly. Because of this job, it might really kill Li Jian. But right now, Zhang Yi had to do it that way because his time was exceptionally tight. I need you to cultivate a special plant for me. A very special plant. After Zhang Yi finished speaking, with just a thought, the silver-gray circle on his right wrist immediately morphed, and the huge sword in the tree turned into a vine extending out. Li Jian's eyes widened as he looked at the animal-like sword in the tree. I can feel that its powerful and majestic life force. This plant, it's very extraordinary. Supreme Excellency, you're asking me to cultivate it, aren't you? Zhang Yi nodded, yes. I know your cultivation method, and cultivating it with your flesh and blood is the fastest and most effective way.